Between November 1942 and May 1943, the bloodiest air campaign in human history unfolded over Europe. The 8th Air Force of the United States suffered catastrophic losses. The statistics were merciless. The average life expectancy of a bomber crew was 11 combat missions. Of every 100 crews who began their service, only 25 lived to complete the required cycle of 25 missions. 71% became permanent casualties. Command required crews to complete 25 combat missions over enemy territory, after which they were supposed to be sent home. In practice, only a handful reached this threshold. Most died, were captured, or sustained injuries that made further flights impossible. Nervous breakdowns occurred so frequently that military doctors introduced a special term: operational fatigue. Boeing B-17F with serial number 41-24485 became an exception to this rule. The aircraft, christened Memphis Belle, and its crew commanded by Captain Robert Kingsley Morgan, became one of the first crews in the 8th Air Force to complete a full cycle of combat missions and return home alive to the United States. This is the story of how it happened. Robert Morgan was born in 1918 in Asheville, North Carolina. He graduated from flight school in 1941, receiving the rank of second lieutenant. At the time of his deployment to England, he was 24 years old. In September 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, he met Margaret Polk, who worked at a local hotel. Morgan gave her the nickname Belle, meaning beauty. The crew was assembled at training centers in the United States during the summer and fall of 1942. Co-pilot James Varinas, 21 years old, from Connecticut. Navigator Charles Leventis, 23 years old, from Chicago. Bombardier Vincent Evans, 22 years old, from Alabama. Flight engineer and top turret gunner Eugene Adkins, 25 years old, from Tennessee. Radio operator Robert Hansen, 23 years old, from Washington. Ball turret gunner Cecil Scott, 19 years old, the youngest on the crew. 2 waist gunners, Casimir Nostal, 24 years old, and Clarence Winchell, 23 years old. Tail gunner John Quinlan, 22 years old, from Pennsylvania. The crew arrived at Bassingbourn Air Base in Cambridgeshire, England, in September 1942. The base was located 50 miles north of London. It was home to the 324th Squadron of the 91st Bombardment Group. Later, in November 1942, the group was reorganized and the crew transferred to the 303rd Bombardment Group, same base. The B-17 F-10BO aircraft arrived at the base on October 7, 1942. Morgan received it on October 13th. The squadron's artist, Sergeant Tony Starcer, painted an image of a girl in a blue bathing suit on the left side of the nose fuselage, based on a photograph of Margaret Polk and a drawing by artist George Petty from Esquire magazine. Under the drawing, they wrote the name Memphis Belle. The first combat mission took place on November 7, 1942. Target: shipyard in Brest, France. Memphis Belle flew as part of a formation of 115 bombers. Flight altitude was 7,600 meters. Outside temperature was minus 38 degrees Celsius. Opposition was moderate. The aircraft received 23 holes from flak fragments. Mission completed successfully. All crew members unharmed. November 9th. Repeat raid on Brest. Same target. Flak fire more intense than the first time. German fighters attacked the formation over the target. Memphis Belle's gunners fired at 3 fighters, claiming 1 possible hit. The aircraft received 38 holes. 1 fragment pierced the oxygen system in the nose section. Navigator Leventis temporarily lost consciousness from oxygen starvation until Bombardier Evans connected him to the emergency system. November 17th. Saint-Nazaire, France. German submarine base protected by massive concrete shelters. The most powerful concentration of anti-aircraft artillery in France. 90 bombers in the raid. 3 shot down over the target. Memphis Belle received 72 holes. 1 shell exploded 3 meters from the right wing. The shockwave threw the aircraft up 20 meters. Morgan struggled to maintain control. November 23rd. Saint-Nazaire again. This time the opposition was even fiercer. The Germans knew the Americans would return. Flak fire began even on approach to the target, 15 miles from the coast. 11 bombers shot down. That's 12% of the total number. One B-17 from the same group as Memphis Belle took a direct hit and exploded in the air. Morgan saw it from the cockpit. Debris flew past his aircraft. December 6th. Lille, France. Railway workshops. Weather abysmal. Solid cloud cover up to 6,000 meters altitude. The formation flew blind most of the way. Over the target, the clouds parted for a few minutes. Bombing was successful, but on the way back, 2 engines began to overheat. Flight engineer Adkins regulated fuel flow manually all the way to base, 3.5 hours standing at the engine panel in an unheated compartment at -40 degrees. December 20th. Romainville, France. Aircraft repair plant. First encounter with German fighters, head-on attack tactics. Messerschmitt Bf-109s attacked the formation from the front, on collision courses. Closing speed reached 800 kilometers per hour. Shooting at them was extremely difficult. One fighter passed 3 meters from Memphis Belle's cockpit. Morgan saw the German pilot's face. Tail gunner Quinlan claimed 1 fighter destroyed, confirmation received from other crews. December 30th. Lorient, France. Submarine base. Last mission of 1942. Heavy flak fire. 1 shell exploded under the fuselage, piercing the floor in 3 places. Fragments damaged the landing gear hydraulic system. After landing, mechanics discovered that one of the main wing spars had cracked for a length of 30 centimeters. Repairs took 5 days. By early 1943, changes had occurred in the crew. Navigator Leventis was replaced by Charles Layton after the 4th mission for medical reasons. Bombardier Evans did not fly on all missions, sometimes replaced by other bombardiers. The exact crew composition varied from mission to mission, which was standard practice. In fact, Morgan's crew flew several missions in other B-17s when Memphis Belle was grounded for repairs. January 3, 1943. Saint-Nazaire, 3rd time. The Germans strengthened the base's defenses to the limit. The raid involved 85 bombers. 7 shot down. Another 12 received critical damage and crashed on landing or were written off after return. Memphis Belle flew in the center of the formation. A flak shell exploded directly in front of the nose section. The plexiglass of the bombardier's compartment cracked but held. The bombardier received mild concussion from the shockwave but continued working. January 23rd. Lorient again. Temperature at altitude -42 degrees. The gunner's machine guns began to freeze from condensation from exhaled breath. Casimir Nostal, right waist gunner, frostbit the fingers of his right hand, removing an iced-over ammunition belt. 3 fingers were subsequently amputated. Nostal never flew again. February 4th. Emden, Germany. First raid on German territory itself for the crew. Fighter concentration exceeded anything seen before. The Luftwaffe threw everything available over northern Germany into battle. Focke-Wulf FW-190S attacked the formation in waves of 20 to 30 aircraft. Attacks continued continuously for 40 minutes. Ammunition for all machine guns completely expended. Gunners fired until the last round. February 16th. Saint-Nazaire, 4th time. Record number of bombers in a single raid up to that point. 176 aircraft. Anti-aircraft artillery destroyed 2 B-17s. Fighters shot down 3 more. Memphis Belle flew in the lead group, taking the brunt. Fragments pierced all 4 fuel tanks in the wings. Fuel leaked in streams. Morgan descended to an altitude of 4,000 meters, where air pressure partially plugged the holes. The aircraft made it to base with nearly empty tanks. Fuel supply was enough for 3 minutes of flight. February 26th. Wilhelmshaven, Germany. Largest naval base on the North Sea. Protected by the most powerful air defense system in Germany at that time. 64 bombers in the raid, 7 shot down. That's 11% losses in one mission. A German fighter came in for a head-on attack on Memphis Belle. The pilot opened fire from a distance of 300 meters. 20mm shells ripped through the cockpit. One hit the armored back of Morgan's seat, stopping 3 centimeters from his spine. Another shell pierced the instrument panel between the 2 pilots. Fragments wounded Varanus in the face and shoulder. Blood filled the co-pilot's eyes. He lost vision for several minutes. Varanus continued holding the controls with one hand while Morgan turned the aircraft. Flight engineer Adkins descended from the top turret, administered first aid to Varanus, bandaged his head. Varanus remained at his post until the end of the flight. For this mission, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross Medal for valor. March 6th, Lorient, third time. The Germans again intensified defenses. Dense flak fire, groups of fighters. Memphis Belle flew in the rear of the formation, the most vulnerable position. Fighters attacked from behind, from the sun. Tail gunner Quinlan fought off 4 attacks, expending all ammunition. One FW-190 came within 10 meters, the pilot clearly visible. Quinlan fired the last burst at point-blank range, saw the enemy cockpit shatter. The fighter veered right and fell into a spin. Confirmed kill. March 12th, Rouen, France. Railway junction. Weather again complicated the mission. Cloud cover forced the formation to fly below planned altitude, at 5,000 meters. At this height, flak was more accurate. 2 B-17s from the same group were shot down in a minute. Morgan saw one explode, the other broke in 2 and fell spinning. He counted 6 parachutes total. 12 men lost. March 18th, Vegesack, Germany. Submarine shipyard. Deep penetration into German territory, 300 kilometers from the coast. Luftwaffe fighters attacked all along the route. Memphis Belle fought off attacks for 2 hours straight. Gunners fired over 4,000 rounds, more than in any previous mission. Ball turret gunner Scott shot down 1 Bf-109, confirmed by combat camera footage. One shell hit the number 3 engine. It had to be shut down. Morgan flew 300 kilometers to base on 3 engines. March 22nd, Wilhelmshaven, second time. The Germans anticipated the raid. Concentration of fighters was enormous. Fighters attacked in formations, coordinated, professional. They singled out damaged bombers and finished them off. 1 B-17 with 2 engines knocked out fell behind the formation. 6 fighters attacked it simultaneously. The bomber fell in flames, no parachutes. Memphis Belle flew in the second group, watched the death of comrades from 200 meters away. March 28th, Rouen again. Short mission, less than 3 hours total. But the Germans sent up everything that could fly. 50 fighters in the air over the target. 2 B-17s collided over the target, trying to evade fighters. Both exploded. 20 men died instantly. Debris from the explosion damaged 3 more bombers. 1 crash-landed on return. April 4th, Paris, France. Renault factories producing trucks for the Wehrmacht. Heavy flak over the city. 1 shell exploded under Memphis Belle, threw it up, nearly collided with the bomber flying above. Morgan dove sharply, passing 20 meters under the formation. Formation discipline broken, had to climb back into position under fire. April 5th, Antwerp, Belgium. The mission immediately after Paris. The crew was exhausted, had no recovery time. Factory producing aircraft parts. Light opposition, relatively easy mission. But on return, over the English Channel, number 2 engine began to lose oil pressure. Engine seized over the channel. Propeller had to be feathered. Landing on 3 engines, one of them damaged from the previous mission. Successful landing, but the aircraft went in for major repairs for a week. April 17th, Bremen, Germany. Major industrial center, heavily defended. Record number of bombers in the raid, 115 B-17. Also record losses, 15 aircraft shot down in 1 day. 13% total losses. Memphis Belle received 103 holes, more than in any previous mission. 1 shell destroyed the radio. Radio operator Hansen received light wounds from fragments. Another shell damaged the elevator control system. Morgan and Varanus had to control the aircraft with maximum stick deflection, flying 300 kilometers with arms tense at the limits. April 18th. Mission canceled due to weather. The crew got a day of rest for the first time in 2 weeks. April 24th. Flensburg, Germany. Shipyard on the Baltic Sea coast. Far north, long flight. 5 hours in the air. Cold at altitude reached -45 degrees. Heating system in the waist gunner section failed. Gunners worked in savage cold for 3 hours. Winchell frostbit his feet, couldn't walk for 3 days after landing. Mission successful. Light opposition due to bad weather that kept fighters on the ground. May 1st. Saint-Nazaire, 5th time. The Germans knew this target would be attacked until destroyed. Defenses reached maximum. Concrete shelters for submarines proved almost indestructible. 123 bombers in the raid. The most powerful bomb load up to that point. Each bomber carried 5,000 pounds of bombs. Memphis Belle carried 12 500-pound bombs. Drop at exactly the right moment, from 7,000 meters. Direct hit on one of the shelters. Massive explosion. But flak was hellish. 10 bombers shot down. One fell directly in front of Memphis Belle. Morgan had to do emergency maneuver to avoid collision with debris. May 13th. Meault, France. Potez Aircraft Factory. Short mission, 2.5 hours. Light opposition, only 1 bomber lost. Memphis Belle received minimal damage. 12 holes from small flak. The crew began to hope. 5 missions remaining. Statistics said most crews died on the last few missions, when they began to believe they might survive. Morgan forbade discussing this. Everyone focused only on the task. May 14th. Kiel, Germany. Major port on the Baltic Sea. 2nd day in a row of missions. No recovery time. Heavy flak. Waves of fighters. Bf-109S attacked from high altitude, diving at 400 miles per hour. One fighter passed so close that its prop wash shook Memphis Belle. Top turret gunner Adkins fired at point-blank range, saw his tracers enter the fighter's engine. The Messerschmitt trailed black smoke and left the battle. May 15th. Helgoland, Germany. Small, fortified island in the North Sea. German radar station and air defense base. Key target for preparation of the future invasion of Europe. Small target, difficult to hit. But defenses were weak. The island was too small for many guns. Light flak, no fighters. Missions successful. 2 missions remaining. The crew began to count hours. 48 hours until the end. Then home. May 17th. Lorient, 4th time. Mission number 24. The crew knew that the next would be the last. If there would be a next. Luftwaffe threw everything they had at them. Fighters attacked from all directions. One FW-190 came in from 9 o'clock high, diving, firing. Shells passed through the left wing, between fuel tank and engine. 10 centimeters to the right, and the tank would have exploded. Tail gunner Quinlan shot down a Bf-109 trying to attack from behind. 2nd confirmed kill for Quinlan. Memphis Belle came home with 87 new holes, 1 mission remaining. May 19th. Kiel, 2nd time. Mission number 25. The last. Command knew this was the last mission for Memphis Belle's crew. They assigned a target that was as manageable as possible under the circumstances. But there were no easy targets in 1943. Kiel was defended as heavily as before. Documentary filmmaker William Wyler flew with the crew on this mission. He worked for the U.S. Army Air Forces and had been filming the 8th Air Force since April 1943. Wyler had already flown on several combat missions with other crews, filming from the bombers. Now he wanted to capture Memphis Belle's final mission. He brought 2 cameramen with him, Sergeant Harold Tannenbaum and Lieutenant William Clothier. They installed cameras in the nose, in the waist, in the tail section. The formation took off at 8 in the morning. 100 bombers. Memphis Belle flew in the center. Good position, less vulnerable than the flanks. Flight to the target 3 hours. Weather clear, visibility excellent. The Germans saw the formation from 100 miles away. Flak began at 10 miles from the city. Dense, accurate. 1 shell exploded 20 meters to the left. Shrapnel riddled 2 bombers. 1 fell out of formation, lagging behind, trying to stay airborne on 3 engines. Fighters immediately attacked it. The crew watched it fall. No parachutes. Over the target, Bombardier Leighton precisely aimed. Bombs away at exactly the right moment. Explosions in the shipyards, secondary explosions, fires. Mission successful. Now turn around and get home. 300 miles to England. 3 hours of flight. The Germans won't let them go easily. Fighters attacked immediately after the bomb run. BF-109s and FW-190s. About 30 aircraft. They knew this was a big raid and threw all available forces into battle. Attacks continued for 40 minutes. Memphis Belle's gunners fired continuously. Shell casings piled up in the waist section up to ankle level. The air reeked of gunpowder and hot oil. One fighter came in from 12 o'clock high, head on. Morgan saw the muzzle flashes, saw shells coming straight at the cockpit. He couldn't dodge, had to hold formation. Shells passed overhead, struck somewhere in the rear. Radio operator Hansen reported, hit in the tail section, but no critical damage. Tail gunner Quinlan okay, keeps firing. Another fighter attacked from the right. Waist gunner Winchell fired long burst. Saw hits on the fighter's fuselage. The German broke off, smoke trailing. Unconfirmed kill, couldn't watch further, other fighters attacking. 15 minutes of continuous combat. Then the fighters turned back, low on fuel or ammunition. The formation flew on. German territory below. Still 100 miles to the coast. Still danger. Flak over the coast again. The Germans placed batteries along the entire shore. Last chance to bring down the bombers. Shells exploded all around. One burst right under Memphis Belle, threw her up. Morgan fought to control. Another shell clipped the left wing, tore off a 2-meter piece of the trailing edge. Aircraft became harder to control but kept flying. English Channel, safety at last. No more fighters, no more flak. But fatigue hit with full force. Gunners collapsed at their positions, could no longer stand. Pilots' hands shook on the controls. Radio operator Hansen sent message to base. Coming in, all crew alive, aircraft damaged but controllable. Landing approach, gear down, flaps down, everything working. Touchdown on the runway, smooth, professional. Brakes, stop, engine shutdown, silence. After 5 hours of continuous engine roar and gunfire, the silence was deafening. The crew climbed out. Ground personnel counted the holes. 127 new ones. Total for all missions, over 200. But the aircraft was still flying, and the crew was alive. All 10 men completed 25 missions. One of the first crews in the 8th Air Force to achieve this. Cameras captured it all. Weiler filmed the crew's faces after landing. Fatigue, relief, shock that they actually survived. These shots became the most powerful moment in his film. Real emotion, not acted. No actor could convey what these men experienced. Command immediately recognized the propaganda value. The 8th Air Force was suffering heavy losses. Public morale at home needed a boost. People needed heroes. Memphis Belle and its crew could become those heroes. There was, however, a complication. Another B-17, Hell's Angels from the 303rd Bombardment Group, had actually completed its 25th mission 4 days earlier, on May 13th. Technically, Hell's Angels was the first 8th Air Force bomber to reach this milestone. But military leadership faced a decision about which aircraft and crew to send home for the publicity tour. They chose Memphis Belle. The name was more appealing to the American public than Hell's Angels, which some officials worried might offend religious sensibilities or seem inappropriate for representing fine American boys. Moreover, William Weiler had been filming Morgan's crew for months, and the documentary footage was nearly complete. Hell's Angels would continue flying combat missions, eventually completing 48 total before returning to the United States in January 1944. By then, Memphis Belle had already become the famous face of the 8th Air Force bombing campaign. Just a week after the final mission, on May 26, 1943, the crew received orders. Return to the United States. Not for rest, for a war bond tour. The War Department organized a large-scale campaign. Memphis Belle would be flown across all America. The crew would speak at rallies, factories, schools. They would sell war bonds financing the war. Memphis Belle flew home across the Atlantic in early June 1943. The aircraft landed first in Washington, D.C. Ceremony at the Capitol. Congressmen, generals, journalists. Captain Morgan made a speech. He spoke simply, without bombast. Spoke about the war, about friends who didn't return, about the need to finish what was started. Congress applauded. Then began the tour. 31 cities in 3 months: New York, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas, Memphis. The crew traveled by train with the aircraft flying separately from city to city. Upon arrival at each city, official ceremony, mayor greeting, music, crowd of thousands. Then the crew spoke. Memphis Belle was put on display in town squares. Lines formed several blocks long to see the aircraft. People wanted to see the legend, touch the skin riddled with bullets and shrapnel. Children climbed into the pilot's cockpit, photographed themselves at the machine guns. Mothers who had lost sons in the war approached Morgan and thanked him for his service, for surviving. Many cried. The crew told the truth. Morgan didn't embellish the war, didn't make it an adventure. He spoke about fear, about how each mission could be the last, about comrades who didn't return, about war not being glory but work, dirty, terrifying, necessary work. People listened, holding their breath. They didn't expect such honesty from military propaganda. William Wyler's documentary was released in April 1944 under the title The Memphis Belle, a story of a flying fortress. 41 minutes of chronicle of the final mission, filmed in real war, without actors or staged scenes. The film was a huge success. It was shown in theaters across the country, often together with appearances by crew members. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts nominated the film for an Oscar in the documentary category. The tour raised over $32 million in war bonds, a huge sum by 1943 standards, equivalent to approximately $500 million in 2025 prices. The money went to building bombers, fighters, purchasing equipment. But the tour's main achievement wasn't in money. Memphis Belle's crew showed America that the war could be won, that duty could be fulfilled, that one could go through hell and return alive. The tour ended in October 1943. The crew went their separate ways. Robert Morgan didn't stay home. He returned to duty, transferred to B-29 Superfortress heavy bombers. He flew in the Pacific Theater of Operations, completed 26 combat missions over Japan. One of his aircraft was called Dauntless Dottie, named after another girl. Morgan ended the war with the rank of colonel, stayed in the Air Force, served until 1965. He died in 2004 at the age of 85. James Varenis, co-pilot, also returned to duty. He became an instructor, trained new bomber pilots. He ended the war as a captain. After the war, he worked in civil aviation, flew commercial flights. He died in 2005. Charles Layton, navigator, stayed in the Air Force after the war, rose to lieutenant colonel, participated in the Korean War, retired in 1963, died in 1995. Vincent Evans, bombardier, returned to civilian life immediately after the war, worked as an engineer in the aviation industry, died in 1980. Eugene Adkins, flight engineer who received burns while fighting the fire, stayed in the military. He served as a technical specialist at various air bases, retired with the rank of Master Sergeant in 1960, died in 2004. Robert Hansen, radio operator, returned home to Washington, worked for a telecommunications company, rarely gave interviews about the war, preferred not to remember, died in 1999. Cecil Scott, ball turret gunner, youngest on the crew, lived to 90 years old. After the war, he got an education, worked as a teacher, actively participated in veterans organizations, often spoke at schools about the war. Died in 2015. Clarence Winchell, waist gunner, returned to the family farm in Iowa, engaged in agriculture until old age, never flew after the war, said he'd flown enough. Died in 2001. John Quinlan, tail gunner who received a shrapnel wound to the leg, returned to peaceful life. Worked at an automobile factory in Detroit. Died in 1992. Casimir Nostal, waist gunner who lost 3 fingers from frostbite. Never flew again. Received disability. Returned home after the tour ended. Worked as a clerk at the post office. Died in 2003. All members of Memphis Belle's crew who flew the 25 missions lived to the end of the war. All returned to peaceful life. This in itself was a statistical miracle. Between 1942 and 1945, Of 100,000 crew members of 8th Air Force bombers, 26,000 died in combat, 26% permanent losses. Memphis Belle's crew escaped this fate. After the tour ended, Memphis Belle did not return to war. The aircraft had too much propaganda value to risk losing it. It was placed in storage at a military property warehouse in Texas. It remained there until 1945. After the war ended, the Army scrapped thousands of bombers. Most went for scrap metal. Memphis Belle escaped this fate thanks to her fame. In 1946, the aircraft was transferred to the city of Memphis, Tennessee. It was installed on a pedestal on National Guard property. For the next 60 years, Memphis Belle stood in the open air. Rain, snow, sun slowly destroyed the structure. Aluminum skin corroded, paint peeled, plexiglass cracked. Veterans and enthusiasts tried to raise money for restoration, but funds were insufficient. The aircraft was deteriorating before everyone's eyes. In 1987, Memphis city authorities finally agreed to transfer the aircraft to the U.S. Air Force for complete restoration. Memphis Belle was disassembled and transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Here began the painstaking work of restoration. Restoration took 23 years. Every part was documented, cleaned, repaired, or manufactured anew. Thousands of hours of work by restorers, engineers, historians. They searched for original parts in junkyards of scrapped aircraft, recreated paint exactly from samples, restored the pin-up artwork on the nose using photographs from 1943. On May 17, 2018, exactly 75 years after the final combat mission, the fully restored Memphis Belle was presented to the public. The opening ceremony took place at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Cecil Scott, the only surviving crew member, attended the ceremony. He was 93 years old. He stood next to the aircraft he flew 3/4 of a century ago, and he cried. Today, Memphis Belle occupies a place of honor in the museum's central hall. The aircraft is in perfect condition, looks exactly as it looked in May 1943. Thousands of visitors each month come to see the legend. Children ask questions, veterans salute, historians study every detail. Hell's Angels, the bomber that actually completed 25 missions first, was not so fortunate. After flying 48 total missions, it was sold for scrap in August 1945 and destroyed. The aircraft that beat Memphis Belle to the milestone by 4 days was melted down and lost to history, while Memphis Belle became the enduring symbol of American bomber crews' courage and sacrifice over Europe.